on the question of the economy, tonight's State of the Union will be a chance for Mr. Trump to tout his economic success over the past year. We'll get a chance to see how well he's carried out his agenda. Back then, Donald Trump a year ago celebrated sweeping tax changes in the tax system.
Since we passed tax cuts, roughly 3 million workers have already gotten tax cut bonuses, many of them thousands and thousands of dollars per worker, and it's getting more every month, every week. Apple has just announced it plans to invest a total of $350 billion in America and hire another 20,000 workers. This, in fact, is our new American moment. There has never been a better time to start living the American dream.
Now, it is true, following on what he said, that workers got one-time bonuses. There's the tax law effect, and you see how indeed that fanned out through against the annual rate of change on wage growth. But you need to remember, rising inflation has cut into these gains. And then you've got the business investment. Now, business investment has been short-lived. Sure, there's the effect of the tax cut, there's the tax law effect, there's the 11.5%, and then it dwindles off again. Many businesses spent the windfall on buying back stocks, buybacks and even dividends. One of Donald Trump's most important talking points is jobs and jobs and jobs again. Last year, he honed in on the auto industry and how major manufacturers were boosting growth at home.
Many car companies are now building and expanding plants in the United States, something we haven't seen for decades. Chrysler is moving a major plant from Mexico to Michigan. Toyota and Mazda are opening up a plant in Alabama. This is all news Americans are totally unaccustomed to hearing. For many years, companies and jobs were only leaving us. But now they are roaring back.
Now, General Motors announced it will add 1,000 jobs. GM's already cut thousands over the past year. So the net effect on US jobs autos. Now, 2014 had a lot, 40-odd thousand, but go to 2018 last year and only 23,700 jobs were added. That is the lowest number for some 4 or 5 years. Donald Trump's put forward an ambitious infrastructure agenda in his last address. He's been pushing for reform on infrastructure since he got on the campaign trail.
I am asking both parties to come together to give us safe, fast, reliable, and modern infrastructure that our economy needs and our people deserve. Tonight, I'm calling on Congress to produce a bill that generates at least $1.5 trillion for the new infrastructure investment that our country so desperately needs.
A D+ infrastructure plan failed. At least that is according to the American Society of Civil Engineers, which gives infrastructure a D+ for the administration. The Chamber of Commerce says it's a priority. You seem to agree. It's the highest number, 44%. Sarah Bloom Raskin served as Deputy Treasury Secretary and as a governor at the U.S. Federal Reserve. Good to see you. Thank you. Well, there you have the raft of economic issues. What will you be listening for most carefully?
Well, Richard, I think you've laid out very comprehensively many of the economic issues that Americans are going to be looking for. And I have to say, looking at some of these areas, I think there are some focal points. One, the tax bill. That was a very expensive tax bill. I mean, it blew a big hole in our deficit. And I'd like to know, and I think a lot of Americans would like to know, whether the net benefits have really panned out for middle Americans. So
right.
That is really one area of focus.
The economy seems to be doing extremely well. Not as well as it had been, and there are huge risks on the horizon. The shutdown wasn't really a major long-term risk as such. So what do you see as the biggest risk?
So there are a number of risks, and they are taking the form of what I would say developing headwinds to some momentum in our economy. One having to do with a slowdown in global demand. So we are seeing some of the powerhouse countries that had been good sources of exports for our businesses. Those countries are experiencing slowdowns in their demand. So global demand slowing down, big headwind. Trade tensions, right? These trade wars are continuing. Haven't seen much of a resolution of them to date. That is starting to wear quite thin on American businesses.
Ahead of this,
those are two of the headwinds.
Right, stay with me. Don't go away. Just want to brief on another issue. Ahead of the State of the Union address tonight, Donald Trump dined with the Fed Chair Jerome Powell on Monday night at the White House. Apparently they had steak. It was an informal dinner. The Vice Chair was there as well to discuss the economy. Now, Sarah, how unusual is it for the Fed Chair and the President to dine in such fashion?
So it is not particularly usual. This was, I would say, problematic from a couple of different perspectives. One is the timing, that this dinner occurred right before the State of the Union. It undermines the sense of independence that the Fed, as our central bank, is supposed to maintain. I don't think Americans like to see a central bank that is appearing particularly political. It should not be a political or be perceived as political. And that dinner could have given the impression that there were discussions that were of a political nature.
But if we go back to when Donald Trump was highly critical of Jerome Powell and saying he regretted appointing him, at that time, just thereafter, Powell said, the chair said, you know, he would meet with the president, and if the president asked him to resign, he wouldn't. Do you think Jerome Powell has sufficiently stated his willingness to stand up against political pressure?
I think the Fed is doing everything it can. This is not a great situation for the Fed to be in, a situation where the president is haranguing constantly the moves that the Fed is making. That is something that is quite problematic from the perspective of policymakers. I think Jay Powell has done a very good job through his press conferences, through his prepared remarks, through other speakers who are members of the FOMC, to make the case that the Federal Reserve is independent. It is not going to be pushed around with political motivation. So I think he has done what he can. I think the Fed must have been attempting to inoculate itself a little bit by having this dinner. As you point out, Richard, the Fed had agreed at a certain point to actually have the dinner. And so probably wanted to go through with that commitment to have the dinner. But we don't know what happened. We really don't know what transpired. I know the Fed put out a comment, as you know, as they should. It would be good to, you know, for the American people to actually see, see the White House do a readout of what happened at that dinner.
Good to see you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Please come back again and help us understand what is happening in these issues in the future. Much appreciated.